the national championship replay, if you want to call it that, the rematch at LSU, who came in number 3 in the nation. We'll get to them in a second. And then they play new member of the conference in Texas A&M, just joining the SEC this season. And then they'll play Western Carolina. It's a little bit of a bye week, if you want to call it that, if you're the Crimson Tide. And then they close out the season at home versus an Auburn team that's really fallen off since winning the national championship game. Still a good team, but definitely not good enough to beat Alabama. So, I mean, real quick, going down the Alabama schedule, I think they're going to win at Michigan, but that's definitely in Alabama's favor. I don't really want to call that a toss-up game. The only 2 toss-up games I see is at Arkansas, the 3rd week of the season, and all the way down against LSU on November 3rd. Those are the 2 games where I think that Alabama might lose, but if they don't, they should probably win those games and should probably be back in the national championship game should Nick Saban's team be. So definitely an interesting perspective there on Alabama. Then we hop over to the number 3 team in the AP poll, that's LSU. Of course, without the Honey Badger, last year's Heisman candidate Tyrann Mathieu, he will not play at the Division I level this year. There was some talk that he was going to go to a Division I AA school, possibly McNeese State, but I think that's fallen apart. I think Mathieu right now, I know for a fact that Mathieu right now is attending a drug rehab center, trying to get himself back. Not sure if he'll play football this season. The hope was that he would go to a D1 AA school, then enter the NFL draft, not get drafted as high as he would have coming out of LSU, but still get drafted at a nice spot. As we look at LSU without Tyrann Mathieu, minus Jefferson, you're going to see Zach Mettenberger step up a lot this year, the junior college transfer who got limited playing time last year behind Lee and Jefferson. But you're going to see him get a lot of time. And this team, I don't see this team going undefeated, and I see this team losing 2 or 3 games, possibly more. I don't see LSU being as good of a team this year. The loss of Tyrann Mathieu really hurts them in the secondary, and you know, if they can catch fire, though, obviously they can be back in the national championship picture. But I honestly don't even think that LSU is going to end up in the top 10 after the season. That's my honest opinion. They're going to start out versus North Texas. That's definitely going to be a win. North Texas, out of a smaller conference, should be a win right there. But you never know. I mean, you saw Auburn last year almost lose to Utah State on the first day of the game. The first game of the season. But I don't see that happening with a North Texas team. Versus Washington. Washington, like we said earlier, with Keith Price, the quarterback there, obviously a very talented team in the Huskies, but I think that's another game that LSU should win at home. But that's going to be a very good game, very entertaining game to watch. A good defense. Even without Mathieu, it's still a good defense, but it's a weak secondary. Keith Price can pass the ball, but that's an offense that's going to run more than pass in the Huskies, who did not get ranked, but received a couple of votes and could find themselves in the top 25. So Washington, of course, that should be another win for LSU. Versus Idaho, that should be a win. Idaho, just football program is just falling off there. Then they go to Auburn Saturday, September 22nd. That's the 4th week of the season. And that's, in my opinion, that's a toss-up game. Auburn, you never know. Auburn's not as good as they were last year, and not as good as they were definitely the year that they won the national championship with Cam Newton. But Auburn, you could see them surprise a couple people this year. Obviously not ranked in the top 25, so you could see them start out well and possibly win this game at home against LSU. So that's going to be a good game right there at Auburn. But I think that's another game that LSU should win. Then they come back home to the Tigers and take on the Towson, a team in Towson that is the Towson Tigers. They are a D1 AA school. Should be another big win for LSU. Then they travel to number 23 Florida. Florida, an improved squad from last year. That's going to be another tough game, another game they could win, but I don't think they will. I think Florida, if they show a strong performance early in the season, is going to really get it rolling. And man, the Gator fans just have it going when it's going their way, and it's in Florida. So that's going to be a tough game for LSU to win. Then they play South Carolina at home. Connor Shaw, in my opinion, one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, taking over for Garcia last year when he left the team or got kicked off the team for South Carolina. They come in number 9 in the nation. We'll get to them in a second as well. But LSU, that's another game I think they might lose, and I think South Carolina has the edge in that game. I think South Carolina is a better team than LSU, and it wouldn't surprise me if South Carolina won the SEC. And I'm in all seriousness when I say that. Obviously, they don't meet Alabama, but they might in the SEC championship game. So that's definitely something to watch out for. Then they go to Texas A&M. This is another tough game for them. Texas A&M, not ranked coming into the season. But, you know, Texas A&M, always a tough place to play at. So that's another game you got to watch out for if you're a Tiger fan. Then, of course, versus Alabama, the rematch of the national championship. We touched on that a little bit earlier, but that's a game that I see the Tigers losing, even though it's at home. Versus Mississippi State, that should be a win. Versus Ole Miss, that should be a win. At Arkansas, Ryan Mallett's going to beat them. Last game of the regular season. LSU's going to go to a bowl game. They're not going to go to BCS Bowl. They're going to lose 2-3 games. That's my prediction for the number 3 team in the season. Number 3 team in the preseason poll, should I say. And, you know, that I completely agree with it. And I don't see why LSU's the number 3 team. I mean, you got to give them some respect coming back from the national championship game last year. But I really don't see LSU making a huge run again this season. I mean, a lot of people talk about the SEC being so overrated. It's not overrated. I'm not going to say it's overrated. I just think that some of these teams are given a little bit too much credit, you know, for what they really do deserve. Because there's weak teams in that conference, like a struggling Ole Miss team who got blown out by Louisiana Tech last year, to say the least. And there's other teams like Tennessee and Vanderbilt that really haven't been at the top for a while. So, excuse me, that's another thing to watch out for. And then we go to the number 4 team in the nation, the Oklahoma Sooners. All right, you look at this schedule. They open up at UTEP. I'll be there for that one. I'm going to put them on upset alert right now. I'm not saying UTEP's going to win that game, but I'm saying they're going to get a fight out of the Miners. As a Miner fan, trust me, I promise you that they will get a fight out of the Miners. Their offensive line is really banged up. They did get James Brown, a transfer from Penn State, their leading receiver. Penn State's leading receiver from last year, so, you know, that's going to help them in the passing game. And Landry Jones, of course, returns. So, you know, Oklahoma's going to be a good team, a national championship contender by all means, but I think UTEP's going to play them close. They come home the next week against Florida A&M. That should be a blowout win. Versus number 22 Kansas State. Kansas State, I think, shouldn't even be ranked. They did have a great year last year. I think they're going to have another decent year this year. But I think that Oklahoma's going to beat Kansas State pretty good. They go to Texas Tech, and they're going to get their revenge from last year. They're going to start off 4-0, are the Sooners. Then they come back home. Excuse me, they always play that Texas game at the Cotton Bowl, that neutral location. Versus number 15, Texas. That's what Texas is. We'll get to Texas. The 5th week of the season. That should be another win for the Sooners. Versus Kansas, that's a win. Versus Notre Dame should be a win. At Iowa State, I don't know. Iowa State beat Oklahoma State last year when they were number 2 in the nation. Going to be a good game there, but I think that's another game the Sooners should win. Versus Baylor, depleted Baylor team, that should be a win. But at West Virginia, I think, is the week that the Sooners get knocked up. Geno Smith, over 4,000 yards last year. Geno Smith and the Mountaineers come number 11 in the nation this year. I think they're going to get knocked out right there. I think that Oklahoma's going to get undefeated until Saturday, November 17th at West Virginia. Obviously, West Virginia coming over from the Big East to the Big 12, and right there, I think that's going to be a game that the Sooners are going to lose. That's my prediction right there. But it's definitely going to be a good game with Geno Smith. If you don't play defense on Geno Smith, he'll put up 60, 70 points like he did last year against Clemson. So watch out for the Mountaineers in this conference, and watch out for the Mountaineers in this game. That's going to be a good game right there, and one that I'm definitely going to be tuned into. But that's a game that I see a potential slip up for the Sooners. Then they play their state rivals, should I say, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. That should be a win at home. Oklahoma State doesn't return Blackman or Brandon Whedon from last year. They're going to be depleted a little bit. So I think that should be a win. And then they go to TCU. TCU was a young team last year, had their share of struggles, but I think that Oklahoma's going to win that game as well and should go on to another BCS Bowl. But I don't think they will go undefeated. Now we go to the number 5 team in the nation, the Oregon Ducks. They open up versus Arkansas State. That's a win. Versus Fresno State next week. That's a win. Versus Tennessee Tech. That's a win. So a pretty weak non-conference schedule for the Ducks, to say the least. They open up conference play by staying at home against the Arizona Wildcats. That should be another win. They go up to Washington State and play the Wildcats and new coach Mike Leake. I think that's going to be another win. So I see them starting off 5-0. Then Washington comes to town. I see that being another win, even though Washington's a good team, but they got their share of good teams that they're playing on their schedule. We already have seen them play 3 top 5 teams already, USC, LSU, and now Oregon. So it's going to be another tough one for Washington. Oregon's going to start out 6-0. They're going to beat Arizona State 7-0. They're going to beat Colorado 8-0. But then they go to USC and play the Trojans. We talked about this game earlier when we were going over USC's schedule. I do see this game as a game that the Ducks can win, but I think Oregon's not as good as they were last season, and the Trojans are better than they were last season. And last year, a Trojan team with nothing to play for, but also nothing to lose, went up to Oregon and knocked off the undefeated Ducks. So, I think USC is going to have the upper hand once again this year and going to win that game. That's going to be Oregon's first loss. The Oregon then travels to Berkeley to play the Cal Bears. That's going to be a win. Stanford comes to Eugene. That's going to be another win for the Ducks. And then they go to their state rival, Oregon State Beavers. That's going to be another win. I see this team finishing up, going to another BCS Bowl, probably another Rose Bowl appearance, with USC going to the national championship game, of course, if USC goes undefeated. If USC doesn't go to undefeated, I think it's because either Utah or Oregon knocks them off. So, or maybe Washington, but, it's going to be another good year if you're a Duck fan. Number 6, it's been Pac-12 and SEC teams highlighting the top 10 so far. Georgia, the Bulldogs, another very good team, went 7-1 in the conference last year, 10-4 overall. They open up the season at home against Buffalo, should be a win. Hop on, travel to Missouri, going to be a tough game, but I think they win there. They play Florida Atlantic at home, should be a win. Then they open up home conference play, their second conference game, their first conference game, because Missouri no longer in the SEC. Vanderbilt should be a win. Tennessee should be a win. Big game Saturday, October 6th, as they head to South Carolina, play the Gamecocks. Another toss-up game right there. Could go either way. To go to Kentucky, should be a win. Play Florida. Florida, neutral location, should be a win. Versus Ole Miss, a win. At Auburn, never know, but I think that should be a win. Then they play Georgia Southern, blowout win, and Georgia Tech to close out the season. So Bulldogs possibly headed for an SEC championship game. Definitely have a possibility of that happening if they can, maybe lose only 1 or 0 games. And, Georgia could go undefeated too. It's really hard to tell early in the season like this because